The Miami Dolphins have fired head coach Mike McDaniel. He's been in charge in Miami for the past 4 years, but failed to make the playoffs in each of the past 2 seasons. The Dolphins currently have the longest postseason win drought in the NFL, dating back to 2000. There are now 8 head coach openings across the NFL, representing a quarter of the league. Time now to bring in CBS Sports NFL writer Tyler Sullivan. And Tyler, I don't know about you, but I thought Mike McDaniel would get another year since he didn't get let go through Wednesday. So in your opinion, why do you believe Miami made this move when they did?
Yeah, it is surprising, right, Chris? The fact that we go through Black Monday, we go through the first half of the weekend, there's really not a peep out of Miami in terms of the status of Mike McDaniel. In fact, it kind of felt like he was safe, and that 5-3 stretch at the end of the season did save his job, at least going into 2026. And of course, we get to Thursday, and that is so not the case. He is now looking for a job, and the question is, did something change? What happened between, let's say, Black Monday, where we felt like he was safe, and now Thursday, where he's out of a job? A lot of people are pointing to a coach in Baltimore that got let go over the course of that time and saying maybe that's the reason why all of a sudden Miami is making this move. The fact that John Harbaugh became available, did that make the organization pivot off of Mike McDaniel in hopes of landing him as their next head coach? That would be awfully presumptuous of them to think that maybe they have Harbaugh in the bag. We'll see how that ultimately unfolds. But overall, I do wonder if maybe it did just take a moment for the organization to say, okay, let's take a beat on what this season was. Yes, we did kind of land on our feet a little bit and became frisky down the stretch with an above 500 record, but we are still looking for a new general manager. We're going to be looking for a new quarterback. Maybe it is just time to hit that full-blown reset and go into a new era.
And based on some of the things you said, Tyler, so they haven't won a playoff game since 2000. Their last division title was in 2008. Signs point to them moving on from Tua Tagovailoa, and you wouldn't bet Tyreek Hill is going to be back. So how attractive is this Miami job outside of, the great weather and the no income tax?
I was just going to say, if we're talking weather and we're talking about the forecast, then sure, it's a great spot to be. Who wouldn't want to be in there? But when you look at the football team, that's a little bit of a different story. And that's where I get a little bit of pushback with the Harbaugh situation, where he is, no doubt about it, the top head coach on the market. And I wonder, why would Miami be at the top of Harbaugh's list if we're strictly looking at football reasons? Because you talk about a tricky cap situation, currently a little over $20 million over the salary cap this coming offseason. You talked about Tua Tagovailoa. What is that going to look like this offseason? It feels like they're going to move on. Tua Tagovailoa talking about how he would welcome moving on from the Miami Dolphins, and a reset would do him good. So you don't really have a clear answer at quarterback. I do not believe that Quinn Ewers is going to be the guy. You played well enough down the stretch that now you're picking 11th in the 2026 NFL draft, so you're out of the range of some of those upper echelon quarterback prospects that are going to go in the top 3. So I wonder how they figure this out and how they land on their feet. If you're a coach looking at the Miami Dolphins, I think you have to understand that it's going to be a couple of lean years before you start going to contention. This is not one of the organizations where you can go in immediately in content.
Yeah, this is not a win now team when you just look at the entire roster and all the uncertainty around some of the key positions. Now, somebody who probably won't have trouble finding a job is Mike McDaniel. Okay, we know he's one of the most brilliant offensive minds that the game has seen. What's next for him? Do you see him potentially being interviewed for some head coach openings or more suited for that offensive coordinator role?
I think he's going to be a popular guy this cycle. And I don't know necessarily if that means he's going to get a head coaching job. There were reports out of Cleveland today that the Browns would be interested in him. Of course, he has a history with that organization, serving as an assistant under offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan back in, I believe it was 2014. So there is a history for the Cleveland Browns, possibly for a head coaching job. But I think that Mike McDaniel is probably going to end up an offensive coordinator somewhere. And I think there's a couple of different spots. There there's a lot of destinations actually that are looking for offensive coordinators that are really attractive. I know right now we kind of only look at head coaching spots, but look at the Detroit Lions. That is one of the most talented offenses in the NFL in terms of skill position players. Jared Goff, you get the opportunity to work with a backfield of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We look at that offense all the time and say it's an embarrassment of riches. They're looking for an offensive coordinator. Go to Washington. The ability to work with Jaden Daniels. Yes, an injury-filled season in 2025, but still one of the more promising young quarterbacks that took his team to an NFC championship in year one. They move off of Cliff Kingsbury. He has a relationship with Dan Quinn. That makes a lot of sense. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are another team. And you talk about embarrassment of riches. How about Emeka Egbuka, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin? So there's a lot of opportunity here for Mike McDaniel. And as you noted, he is one of the top offensive minds in the NFL. So I do not believe he will be unemployed long.
Yeah, he's not going to be sitting at the unemployment line for very long when you look at his resume and what he's been able to build. Tyler Sullivan, always appreciate the insight, man. So with the Dolphins firing Mr. McDaniel, we're now up to 8 head coaching vacancies in the NFL. They include the Giants, Ravens, Titans, Falcons, Browns, Raiders, Cardinals, and Dolphins. 8, though, is not the record. That belongs to 2009 when there were 11 new head coaching hires. Up next, while some teams don't have to worry about finding their franchise QBs, it's a bit more complicated for the Colts and the Falcons. We examine how they plan to handle their signal caller situations after the break. The Falcons are searching for a new general manager and a new head coach, but one thing they won't be looking for, apparently, is a new quarterback. Michael Penix Jr. suffered a torn ACL in Week 11 against Carolina, and Atlanta is likely to cut Kirk Cousins in March. However, speaking to the media for the first time since the season ended, owner Arthur Blank expressed his support for Michael Penix Jr. as the starter.
We look forward to having Michael back. He's had good surgery. We spoke to the medical staff. It seems to have gone well. Kirk, we'll see what will happen with him going forward. I do think Michael is our franchise quarterback. The injury he sustained was on his other knee. The surgeon felt 1,000% secure in the medical procedure they went through, and they really felt his knee was going to be even better than it was before.
Tap now to bring in CBS Sports NFL writer Tyler Sullivan. And Tyler, Arthur Blank obviously views Michael Penix Jr. as the future of this franchise. And as much as I love lefty QBs being a left-handed person, I'm not so sure of that when you look at all his injuries, right, how we look this year. Do you share Mr. Blank's viewpoint or not?
I don't. I do not think that Michael Penix Jr. is going to be the franchise quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, he can prove me wrong. Lefty can prove me wrong, certainly. But I kind of feel like this is what Arthur Blank has to say, right? Like, I don't think he is in a position at the moment to make any declarations about where this team could go at quarterback outside of the guys that they already have. Obviously, we feel like they're going to move off of Kirk Cousins, and you still have Michael Penix Jr. on his rookie contract. You invested a first-round pick in him. It just feels like that's something that they need to at least see through for one more year. And you have to remember, they're going through an overhaul throughout the entire organization. They are looking for really a new masthead over the entire organization, but new general managers, front office, head coach. They're the ones that are going to have to make the decision on what their quarterback situation is going to be. So first and foremost, Arthur Blank's going to want them to look at Michael Penix and say, do you believe you can make him my franchise quarterback? And they'll make that determination, but he has to find those coaches and those front office men first.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up overhaul because the Falcons, they're not the only ones dealing with the overhaul. You got the Buccaneers coaching staff. They're undergoing a major change, right? Because Tampa, they failed to make the playoffs for the first time since 2019. Among the coaches let go was first-year offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard. So Tampa will now be looking for their 5th different OC in the last 5 years. The Bucs have changed coordinators every year of Baker Mayfield's tenure with the team. And when you think about all the coaches that will not be returning for next season, you got former Texas coach Charlie Strong won't be back, QB coach Thad Lewis. I mean, this is instability, right? And not something that you want to see if you're trying to have consistency with your organization. And Tyler, I'll ask you this. What do you make of all the changes in Tampa and the fact that Baker Mayfield will once again have a new offensive coordinator?
Yeah, it's pretty jarring to see the list of names, the entire overhaul. Honestly, it kind of feels like, all right, if you're doing all that, you might as well just get rid of the head coach and really start this thing entirely over. Obviously, they're not doing that. They're giving Todd Bowles another opportunity in 2026, but you know how this is going to go. We go into the summer. We're going to talk about which coaches are on the hot seat. Todd Bowles is going to be one of those names at the top of the list. And that's bad news for Baker Mayfield because this is someone who is playing on the final year of his deal in 2026. We'll see what happens this offseason in terms of whether or not they can come to some sort of an extension. But this is someone who has revitalized his career to this point, has himself in a really good situation in terms of the talent around him, playing with Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka, Bucky Irving, Chris Godwin. There's a lot to like there from a skill position standpoint from Baker Mayfield, but you still need that trusted option on the sideline in your ear. And so we talk about, we talk a lot about the Detroit Lions losing Ben Johnson. The fact that they lost Liam Cohen, the Buccaneers did last year, is something that I don't think we talk about too much. How important he was to the success of the Buccaneers a year ago. Obviously, we see what he's doing with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. And I just wonder if the Buccaneers, if they don't stick the landing here and find an offensive coordinator that can really get this offense back on track, I wonder if that means the end of Todd Bowles at some point next season, and that just derails another year of Baker Mayfield's career.
Yeah, because when you look at this division, it should have been theirs, right? With all the talent that they had, I know they dealt with injuries, but you cannot end the season the way they did and look at it and think it was a success. So, yeah, a lot of questions that still need to be answered, and Todd Bowles definitely will be on the hot seat when the season begins. Now, GM Chris Ballard for the Indianapolis Colts says, despite the Achilles tear that ended his season early, the Colts hope to get Daniel Jones back in Indy. Stability has been hard to come at the quarterback position in Indianapolis. The Colts have started a different quarterback in week 1 in 8 of the last 9 seasons. Now, Ballard talked about how the organization views Jones as a short and long-term option. Take a listen.
I think it's mutual on both sides. I think Daniel was a really good fit for this organization, and I think this organization and city were a really good fit for Daniel.
Does the injury impact things?
Well, of course. We'll work through that, with his agent. And he's got a really good agent, and we'll find a way to work through that. And I feel very good, about Daniel Jones and where he's at, where he's going. Yes, he's got the Achilles, but I think Daniel Jones is got a really bright future here in Indianapolis. And look, there is some comfort knowing that, okay, we know we've got a guy that's proven, that's done it, and done some really good things. And so that does give you some confidence.
Tyler, we all know how dominant the Colts looked before Daniel Jones got hurt. I mean, there were some games right before he eventually tore his Achilles where, he started to regress a little bit. But they were the best team in the NFL. Is the confidence we're hearing from Chris Ballard about Jones being the short and long-term answer, is that valid in your mind?
I think so. I think that really what other choice did the Indianapolis Colts have at this point? Do you really want to try to go back into the NFL draft and find a quarterback like they tried to do with Anthony Richardson? They know that that's a risky game. Do you try to find another Daniel Jones in terms of a veteran quarterback that's out there to be had, whether it be via trade or in the free agent market? That's a little bit of an unknown as well. They have a known commodity in Daniel Jones that works and worked in their organization, and not just worked, but had a lot of success. Yes, there were some signs where maybe things were starting to move down in a negative direction, or at least come back down to earth a little bit from the unbelievable start that we saw at the beginning of the season. But overall, we did see Daniel Jones kind of be this latest guy, whether it's Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, all these late bloomers that we've seen in the NFL over these last handful of years, Geno Smith being another one during his days back in Seattle. It seemed like he was going to be that next guy. Now, the Achilles injury does play a factor into this, but I think it plays a factor in the sense of what kind of deal he gets. I don't think it's a factor of whether or not he's going to be with Indianapolis or not. I think that this is a scenario where possibly the franchise tag comes into play. Maybe that's what the Indianapolis Colts end up doing with Daniel Jones to see how he progresses from the injury, see how he progresses in this system with one more year, and maybe that leads to a long-term extension. Or they look at him and say, hey, listen, we really like you. We're going to give you that Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield 3-year, $100 million extension because we feel like you're the future. I think both of those are still in play regardless of that injury.
Hey, listen, I'm going to tell you this, Tyler. That's a successful story for Daniel Jones because after what happened, right, in Giants land, you didn't think that this would be possible. So I think still things are up for Daniel Jones when you look at the totality of his career. Tyler Sullivan always giving us great insight. Appreciate you, man. And here's the thing about Indy. They started off so great, 8-2, but finished 0-7. Unbelievable. One of the worst second halves of a season that we have ever seen a franchise come into.